but he does switch up things a lot. And I think this lineup is pretty different to anything he's played. Like, he has Yellow Rush, he has the red deck, which we didn't get a chance to see, 2 blue decks. I mean, in the last 2 opens, he's had Green Rush, he's had Green Yellow Sacrifice, Blue Yellow Events, Yellow Rush again. Like, he can just play anything. He's just very good at Feria.
Yeah, really all over the place with the deck choices, and that versatility of being able to bring different things means that your opponent can't take certain reads on your play. Sometimes if we're seeing players bring the same things from tournament to tournament, you kind of get accustomed to what they're going to play, what their strengths are, and then you can use that as an advantage to either ban something out or set up your own way that your lineup is going to play out with, okay, I need to start with a certain deck to counter something, and then set up how the best of 5 series is actually going to play out.
I think it's an interesting ban here for Teddy, because I feel this is a correct ban for Teddy, because the red rush is the blowout. Like, a red rush can have such a start that it's really difficult to deal with. Like Gift of Steel on Queen's Guard, you can eliminate that option, eliminate the aggressive option, and look at fighting these kind of slow grindy decks that happyjo has brought. The biggest question mark for me is the red yellow deck. So I think that's probably going to be Combat Burn, because we didn't get to see it last time happyjo played. But maybe Teddy feels comfortable enough to take this deck down, because this could potentially have a good matchup against the blue decks.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to see Teddy starting off with that Yellow Rush. Of course, we saw how well he played that earlier on in the day. happyjo having a lineup that potentially does counter that really well, even if he loses the first game. Just having so much red in the deck means that you can actually pick up a lot of very good clears onto the smaller things that Teddy's going to play out.
Spider, very good start there for happyjo, especially with Axe Grinder, so we can get that turn 1 collector down and then gear up towards the Spider. Wood Elemental representing problems for those salmons to get that orb damage in. We've seen how much Feria Teddy can build with this deck. It's kind of ridiculous, really, for a rush deck, but he does need to hit the orb in most cases. You need to get those Sagittariuses going. And taunts like Wood Elemental, Living Willow, they're a big problem for Yellow Rush.
Yeah, exactly. happyjo with a great start, because you get early creatures down, you get creatures that are either difficult for Yellow Rush to fight into, or creatures that pick up a lot of value back the other way, like the Stalker. Potentially, if he picks up something like a Ground Shaker, if he's running those in the deck, that can also get a lot of value. That's going to buy Happy.
You just had a little cutout there, dude. Just cutting out a bit. I'm not sure why.
Oh, that's really weird.
I don't know. I missed that. The stream might have missed what you were saying then. I'm not
okay,
sure.
Yeah, I just saying happyjo's got a lot of very good early creatures here. If his hand was all Crackthorns, Yellow Rush would be able to get in at him way earlier than he's able to set up. But these early creatures are going to buy a lot of time.
I think happyjo's hand is almost perfect for this matchup. He has the removal, the early removal, which will survive against the first hit of a demonic salmon. He has the taunt, so he can lock them in place to start things off. He has the cheap axe grinders that can match the Shaitan scavengers, but most importantly, Leia is just a nightmare, because you have to just run your hasters into the Shimmering statue before you can even get to the orb.
Yeah, exactly. Even if Teddy's going to be able to get a few early shots in here, then you're going to have to deal with the body of Leia, as well as the structure giving happyjo life, and the taunt, like you mentioned, being a real nuisance for Teddy to punch through.
Bit curious on happyjo not moving the Wood Elemental over onto the Prairie just to block any potential salmon plays this turn, or forcing at least Teddy to build a desert to the left, which he's actually considering doing anyway, to move away from this taunt, which is quite heads up, I think, because then he can play the Scavenger, which can then challenge the Axe Grinder, or potentially set up for a Wind Soldier on the follow. So he's going to wait. So I think he's going to gear up for Wind Soldier going forward.
Yeah, patience by Teddy, something that we saw in the previous series when we saw him play this yellow as well. He's going to wait for the Wind Soldier, get a little bit of clear of creatures cleared here, and then set up for the aggressive right to the orb.
And he doesn't really have the best options going forward. He probably wants maybe a Sagittarius, maybe a Mistral Guide, something quite meaty to follow up onto the Axe Grinder. The Scavenger's not bad, but it can be answered by stuff like Flame Burst, so something for him to keep in mind. I think it's actually wise here for happyjo to take the layer line on the left-hand side now that we've seen Teddy build deserts that way.
Also a little difficult for happyjo here. I don't know if you want to go for Leia down before there's any creatures on board. Does kind of line up poorly into the Shaitan Scavenger, but into anything else small or into a Crusader, Leia can pick up a lot of value. So happyjo with a bit of an awkward play here just because you aren't really sure of what you want to go for.
For me, I feel that the most mileage Leia gets right now is from the taunt structure. I think the Death Touch is a luxury. What you really want is that taunt structure down early, because it actually slows down the Crusaders a lot, because the Salmons have to hit into it, a Wind Soldier has to hit into it maybe, and they just die. They don't actually push any damage and increase the power in these Crusaders. And we're going to see this guy go in, hit, get the Scavenger reduction, maybe even tempo out a Crusader just to challenge the structure after, because, like I said, it's just an awkward thing to deal with haste creatures.
Yeah, definitely. Teddy just doesn't have the land set up right now to be able to go for something like Wind Soldier and Flash Salmon to kill off Leia and then set up another creature in behind. Hovering over the Crusader and getting both of these down is pretty good because Leia can only trade into one of them. And like you said, that means the other one will be left behind to actually kill off the structure.
Oh, wow. So can he just go for the grappling hook here and kill the Scavenger and then leave Leia up to kill the Crusader on the follow-up? I mean, he can Flash Summon Wind Soldier to Leia, but I think you're perfectly fine with that as happyjo. I think this is a perfect grappling hook turn because it gets Leia to collect, it kills the Scavenger, and then it kind of reverses Teddy's option here of killing Leia and the structure.
Yeah, Grappling Hook is a great card right now in this situation. Like you said, going to give Leia that free attack, move over and get the collection. Could also go for the block here, but I think the collection is a little more important just so that next turn if happyjo draws a Crackthorn, you can actually play it.
I'm going to go for Axe Grinder block, actually. So he has the best of both worlds, right? He gets a collection and the block. So forcing the Zealous Crusader to either clear the Axe Grinder to give the Salmon the path, or maybe develop another land, which in most cases the Yellow Rush player doesn't want to do, wants to draw cards. So I like this. happyjo just giving Teddy questions to answer, and how he answers them is going to dictate how happyjo plays. We had this situation before, didn't we, where Teddy was the one asking questions and Sunkichi had to have all the answers.
Yeah, definitely. But really nice here by Teddy, can go across and kill off the Wood Elemental. Really heads up actually by his planning last turn, because he played the Scavenger on the well and then played the Crusader on the desert that it just moved from, instead of the other way around. That opened up a potential line like this. So Teddy really planning ahead, it looked like, in the fact that he could get so much range with that Crusader, even if his initial setup backfired.
And again, going for potentially setting up the Scavenger with the Crusader to deal with Leia in one, again, after taking that clear on the Wood Elemental. We do see the Spider in hand, so the Spider is actually going to be fantastic here because he can Spider the Crusader or Flame Burst it, and then he could even Spider the 1/1 instead and then clear the Scavenger, setting up that taunt in a difficult spot. The problem is, now that the double neutral has been pushed across, Teddy still has an avenue of attack because of Leia's positioning. So he's gonna have to think about this. He's gonna have to consider what to do next.
Going for the draw can sometimes be kind of awkward in this situation. Didn't, but could have drawn a Crackthorn, and it just ends up being a dead card in your hand. Groundshaker, not terrible here, but just not really what you want to see. So potentially it's just a full clear.
Yeah, I like this. Go for the Flame Burst as well. Oh, is he going to Flame Burst the Scavenger? I actually don't mind this so much. I don't actually mind Flame Burst the Scavenger there. Oh, I don't know about a taunt there. I kind of liked it on the mountain because it just had complete coverage of the left-hand side. Now Teddy had the opportunity to desert in the center or on the right-hand side in the middle and have two avenues of attack. If it's on the mountain, it does make things quite awkward.
Yeah, this sets up being a little awkward for Teddy because happyjo now has made it very difficult to clear the structure in a way that Teddy could then set up a creature to collect on that desert. If it was on the mountain space, Teddy could have used his creatures from that desert and actually collected while using their haste to hit into the structure. Now, like you just mentioned, this does open up a line through the middle, but it doesn't end up. Teddy doesn't end up going for it. He ends up putting it in between the wells.
The shame there's no Ground Shaker. Ground Shaker would be a fantastic follow-up. Double neutral Wood Elemental seems to be what happyjo is going for, and I do like this because he is gearing up for aggressive Crackthorns. Because at the end of the day, happyjo does need to win as well. He does need to push damage of his own. So Wood Elemental here, going to lock out additional lands as well. So just really tightening up Teddy's aggressive options.
Yeah, really smart land placement by happyjo. Depending on the deck that you're playing, sometimes the player would go for a double neutral and then the forest directly on the well. But that actually doesn't set up well for your Crackthorns later on. This land movement that happyjo's gone for sets up for the Crackthorn dash being one space away without needing to create any extra lands. So if happyjo had gone for that towards the well, he would have needed another land at some point to be aggressive, whereas this build doesn't need that.
Yeah, he's maximizing his power wheel use, which can be very important. No Crackthorn picked up, unfortunately, but he does have collect +1 Ground Shaker, and then he can clear out the Scavenger with the Spider, and that's going to work out really nice. It's a little unfortunate there isn't a mountain in range of collection. I think that's the sad thing about the Ground Shaker play, but it just clears the board. That you can't really complain when going up against Yellow Rush.
Yeah, and the great thing here, as you mentioned, that there's no mountain within collection range, but the Ground Shaker in the middle here contests everything that Teddy would play on the right side of the board, and anything that he would play on the left side is contained by that Shimmering Statue. So even though this turn the Ground Shaker won't collect and the Flash Salmon's going to die, so the Ground Shaker then doesn't trade into anything, Teddy's still contained with where his creatures possibly could have been.
He also gets the opportunity to step on this desert, which is pretty good. Like, stepping on the desert stops Teddy from hitting the orb with salmons for a turn, and just forcing Teddy to deal with the Ground Shaker, or at least wait until it decides to collect Feria. I don't mind a draw too much in this situation. Or maybe if you want to be a bit greedy with lands, you can just double neutral straight down, Sagami Warrior aggressively, and then on the follow-up, you can Axe Grinder on the bottom right, and then you're representing 3 damage followed by 8 damage on the follow-up turn. But decides to go for the draw after, so I still like Sagami Warrior aggressively here. Just start chipping away at Teddy, just creating a form of inevitability. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, definitely. Eventually down the line, it can be Crackthorns, but you're giving Teddy so much time right now. And a lot of times that's all that Yellow Rush really needs. They just need a little bit of time to build resources back up into the hand and then unleash something big like the Crusader that we now see picked up. We know that Teddy also has Last Nightmare in the deck from seeing it earlier, so something like a Last Nightmare into a Crusader can be a big swing for him. So at some point, happyjo will need to play something aggressive, and that definitely could have been a situation where he goes for the Sagami Warrior, especially with the guidance picked up. That buff can represent a 4-turn clock potentially.
Luckily, the Shimmering Statue has had a major impact on the game so far. It's just slowed Teddy down enough on the left side, giving happyjo this breathing room. So maybe he felt that Sagami Warrior was fine because the Shimmering Statue gave him that extra time. But going forward, he's still not picking up those threats. He just needs to find a Crackthorn now. Maybe you draw for that Crackthorn. I guess you do have the guidance, but you're still going to lose both creatures. That doesn't feel really good. I think you might just block with the taunt here and just sit there for a while. I'm not sure. It's a tough situation for happyjo.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a draw turn because now if you draw Crackthorn, you can move both of your creatures into collection and actually have the ability to play Crackthorn. And then you can try to manipulate the trades in the way that you want by potentially trading off your Wood Elemental first, or leaving it alive and just kind of seeing where everything lands. And then you get that creature to dash forward as well. So yeah, like I mentioned, here's the Crackthorn. The land requirements are already met. happyjo can make the movements to collect and play that. And then it's just a matter of if he goes for the trades first or play the Crackthorn and see how it pans out.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm curious to see how he manages this. Is it hopefully aggressive Crackthorn? I want to see aggressive Crackthorn this turn. No, goes defensive.
Ooh, that's super unfortunate as well.
Yeah, that's a little sad. But on the flip side, the taunt is gonna lock. It's gonna lock this Zealous Crusader down, and then he can guidance. He could have guidance the Ground Shake. I'm pretty sure it's just going to get eaten up by a Nightmare in this situation. But yeah, guidance on the Ground Shake would be nice to finish it off. But Last Nightmare going to take care of that.
Yeah, really disappointing on the Crackthorn there, because it essentially ended up being wasted pings. If happyjo had been able to get 1 damage onto the Crusader or 1 extra buff onto the Ground Shaker, it would have survived, or it could have just traded into the Crusader. But because of the way everything panned out, happyjo would have needed to use both creatures to trade into it, went for a greedy line because that didn't pan out, did get punished a little bit with the Last Nightmare coming down, and now we see it looks like aggressive Crackthorn, but none of the buffs hit it.
They're going to take a more defensive stance by the looks of things, going up. I think I still like the dash towards the desert just to help manage Sagittarius if it comes down, because it directly challenges it, and it is out of reach of the Mistral Guide. The Mistral Guide can still throw Wind Soldiers at it, which is fine. I like the move here onto the desert as well. Just lock out that option. Just make sure that Teddy has to build another desert somewhere. Oh, no, he can actually just go on the left side, so it makes no difference. He can just sit on the collection ready for next turn.
Having that Mistral Guide survive is actually really nice for Teddy, not only because it opens up different lines with his creatures, but because he also has the collection here. He could potentially go for another Mistral Guide if he wanted to, or use the Sagittarius into kind of that dash position, get it right up in the top corner if he wants, and then set up the salmon in behind. There's just a lot of things that Teddy can go for just because the guide survived.
I wonder if you guide there instead. Go for the guide into the salmon. But happy to get the fairy. I guess the economy's worth. Oh, we can anyway.
You can still get it down, yeah.
Lovely. That's what you want to see. Oh, just go for the Zealous Crusader. What's Green Red going to do in this situation? Feels bad, man.
Yeah, 9/9 Crusader will be difficult to deal with. However, the Sagami that's up there is a 7/8, so potentially a buff does clear that. So Teddy going to keep it out of range. Doesn't go for the full dash 2, just dashing 1 so he can ensure that it hopefully stays alive.
And sits on that mountain as well, so locks out defensive options from that position. Wood Elemental picked up here. Doesn't quite have a position where it can taunt anything relevant, unfortunately. The Spider's good. It does get to eat the salmon, so the Spider can have a nice tasty meal there and slow things down. It's just the positioning is kind of off now. This Crackthorn can push 3 damage. It's not really that relevant, unfortunately. I mean, he could make an aggro mountain and slam an X-Grinder, go for the race, but it's not looking good.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if happyjo had 1 more Faria than the guidance and aggressive Axe Grinder, I think is definitely the correct way to go. But in this situation, if you're going to hit into the orb with just the 3/3 damage, you put your opponent to 12, and you've got 8, potentially with the buff, 10 damage represented next turn. So again, like we talked about earlier, it's not setting yourself up for lethal next turn when your opponent has lethal in 2 turns. So happyjo either needs to find a way to defend, to survive, or a way to win on his next turn. I just don't see a way that works.
Oh, he is going for aggression with the 5 damage there. So it's a 2-turn clock. Does move the Sagami into a position. The Sagami is vulnerable now to the Crusader. So the Crusader can make short work of that. Luckily for happyjo, the buff kind of saved him. Well, it actually hasn't. He can still double Soul Drain Spirit Theft, the Crackthorn, and next turn he has the option to Crackthorn.
I was more looking at even before he could have gone Soul Drain and Spirit Theft on the Axe Grinder, and because of the positioning, played it up in the top corner and actually got a 5/4 Axe Grinder down and just reinforced his position that way. But Teddy really liking your line of stealing the Crackthorn and setting up for something big.
I actually like the Axe Grinder line a lot. I like them both. I think they both have pros and cons. I think the Axe Grinder line... Oh, he takes both. He doesn't... he just takes both anyway. I like it. So he has the best of both worlds, Crackthorn and Axe Grinder. Feels good, guys.
Really love this play by Teddy as well, going for the more control line, because he just limits absolutely everything that Happy Joe can do on this turn. Has to go for the +1 into a creature that's not even going to survive, so Teddy still stays in the lead.
He gets the Pew Pew. Are we seeing Crackthorn this turn?
I think we're going to see it.
So.
One more desert.
Yeah, we're going to see it. Okay. Oof, oof, ooh. That's nasty. That Crackthorn's a 6/6 and runs onto the forest. No taunts for you, sir.
Yeah, fantastic buffs there, getting them all onto the Crackthorn. It doesn't hit any buffs onto the Mistral Guide, which now is just collection for Teddy, so the buffs there don't matter. Hits only 1 onto the Sagittarius, so even though Teddy had to go for the attack first to get the extra fairy to play Crackthorn, he only misses 1 damage, and just controlling absolutely everything that Happy Joe could do in that game, Teddy takes it.
I do feel that Happy Joe kind of gave those opportunities to Teddy without playing aggressive himself. By the time he made an aggressive line, it wasn't really that relevant. Like, if he had gone for, like, aggressive Sagami, maybe an aggressive Axe Grinder on the follow-up, like, he could have, like, pushed and forced Teddy to play more defensive. But he instead just played, like, super defensive. And that's the problem sometimes against Shadow Rush. You can defend all you want, but they do find their way around it. And if they take control of the board, it's usually lights out. And in that situation, that's what happened.
Yeah, so we will get into game number 2 here. Happy Joe looking to start the comeback and trying to find a way to give Teddy his first game loss of the day.
It hasn't happened yet. So we have the blue-red. This deck has been pretty impressive. It was very good against Chaholic. Had some awesome Recurrent Copter plays. Rewarded his patience. Recurrent Copter definitely relevant against Salmons after their first hit. It can clear them out nice and clean. Doesn't quite reach the Scavengers or the Mistral Guides, but with extra resources such as the Ground Shakers and maybe Cypher's Drafts, he can get there. But yeah, I'm curious to see how he plays. Is he just going to play super defensive again, or is he maybe happy to go a bit more aggressive since his deck is mid-range?
Yeah, definitely we'll have to see, but like you mentioned, there are a lot of value plays that Happy Joe can come up with through the course of this game. Little awkward start here for Teddy, potentially going to go for the Prairie, set up something like a Flash Salmon into Zealous Crusader.
Oh, and Humbling Visions. Humbling Visions, we've seen it a few times today, but it's still like a very powerful card. It can really tone down the Zealous Crusaders when they come down. And, but having the option to make the Zealous Crusaders smaller is definitely gonna play a role if Teddy has to rely on them to gain board presence or maybe even push damage.
I'm kind of surprised a little bit there that Happy Joe actually stepped up. The only real other option would have been to go for a mountain on the other side of his orb and then not move the Axe Grinder. But moving into this position actually sets up for giving Teddy the clear with the Wind Soldier.
And you probably go Zealous here now that the Axe Grinder's dead. Yeah, I mean, you can just tempo this out. It's a 4/4 for 4. That's good. That's face man value. And now there isn't that creature to challenge it. But Recurrent Copter Cypher's Draft, that's a pretty good follow-up.
Yeah, it is a fantastic one. Even just looking at the Feria, Happy Joe could have potentially had something like Ground Shaker Flame Burst, although that is a lot of investment just to kill off a Crusader. Anytime you can kill one early in the game when it's not, getting to the stat levels that we saw last game, it's a win. So the fact that happyjo now has an efficient one with Rakowacopter and Cypher's Wrath is just fantastic. Also, the flying on Rakowacopter, get between the wells. Really nice start here for happyjo.
So the Wind Soldier did punish, but the Rakowacopter Cypher's Wrath was definitely a good recovery from the clear. Maybe this is happyjo's plan all along. Get that tempo Zealous Crusader down. But Teddy still has gas. Flash Salmon picked up. Prayer can cycle it out. He's not far away from the Spirit Theft as well. So one land away from Soul Drain Spirit Theft and Rakowacopter, and picking up some removal options of his own.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on Rakowacopter being one that you would want to take with Spirit Theft, because there probably are better options in a deck like this. But the fact that you could get just any creature always reinforces really nicely for Yellow Rush.
Now, call me a mad person, but I like aggressive Ground Shaker here. Yep, go for it. You have Shifting Tides now, so you can clear the Mistral Guide, Shifting Tides it across next turn, and hit for 5, and then you put that pressure on, put that clock down.
Yeah, and that's definitely what happyjo's going for. If he's got Flame Bursts in the deck, then you have that much more burst out of hand. So getting some hits into the orb this early on, when your opponent doesn't have anything set up, and you also have the Feria and board advantage that you can set up there, looks like the perfect time for happyjo to go aggressive. Looks like he is going to go for the shift. We'll have to see if it's backwards. No, he is going to go for the aggressive right to the orb. So just like you were talking about, get those hits in. Does have the Humbling Vision and Cypher's Wrath potential for next turn. Goes for the Humbling now.
Yeah, just damage control, right? Just because he's racing, he's figured, all right, if I can slow down the damage, the race is in his hands. We'll see if it works out that way. I'm not sure. I guess he does have Last Nightmare. But then again, if this Ground Shaker gets another hit and then he plays something like maybe an Axe Grinder or just any kind of threat, the Ground Shaker doesn't matter anymore if it gets Last Night.
Yeah, exactly. It really depends on what happyjo is able to draw this turn, whether it's off of the natural draw at the start of the turn, or he goes for a draw with the Power Wheel and finds something like an Axe Grinder. He needs another creature to reinforce, because if this Ground Shaker isn't enough, then, what's the next step? Because he's put himself a little bit behind because of going for just the orb damage now.
Oh, big choice. Do you +1 War Machine and hit for 5? I think that was definitely what I would do. Or do you Cypher's Wrath the 2/2? I really like push 5, play War Machine, because it just kind of consistent with what happyjo's been doing. He's sticking to the consistent line of just rushing down. I guess Brigand's okay. He can play it defensive if he wants to chip away at the Mistral Guide. So Brigand wasn't a bad draw, but it's still a bit risky.
There's just so many things of the resources that Teddy could have, because he has 4 cards in hand. It's very difficult for happyjo to kind of make the read on what they could be. If there was 1 card in Teddy's hand, I think you're much more likely to make exactly this play, where you don't think there's as many things that could punish you. But happyjo just says, no, I've committed to this game plan of going for the orb, try to end this game as quick as possible. I've got the Cypher's Wrath, potentially going to draw into Flame Burst. I'm going for it right now.
Now, how do you clear? I guess you can hit Soul Drain, Spirit Theft. That gives a lot of life, actually. That's 5 life, clear the board. He could go for a greedier line, I guess, and then hit the Brigand. But I don't like hitting the Brigand, just mainly because you give a bit of extra theory to your opponent. But yeah, he's just going to do this. I'm not sure why he built I guess he built the extra desert for the Spirit Theft and just decided he didn't need an aggressive one, so went for a more defensive desert.
Yeah, such a great play there for a bunch of reasons like you just detailed. Of course, you didn't attack into the Brigand, so your opponent doesn't get that extra Feria to use. He also gained so much extra life that puts him at least a little more even in terms of the race. And he also still has the Last Nightmare in hand, depending on what the next threat that came down from Happy Joe was. So even in this situation, if Teddy wanted to, he can lose value by using a 6 Faria Last Nightmare onto a 4 Faria War Machine if he wanted to, or he can just play more creatures out onto the board and have that kind of first advantage in the race.
Yeah, I think you just salmon into the Scavenger now. Salmon into Scavenger. You could collect, I guess, with the Mistral Guide if you want a bit more Faria for next turn. If the Last Nightmare is an option, like Last Nightmare is the ace, right? He can, if he ever feels threatened, he can just Last Nightmare that threat and continue to win the race. So I do think the 2 damage is worthwhile now. Put him down to 12, put him then down to 11 with the Salmon. He could even play Brigand if he wants to generate more Faria. I could even play Scavenger defensively, so could go Scavenger defensively, aggressive Brigand, and then he also represents generating additional Faria in the later turns.
Yeah, I really like the aggressive Brigand if he's going to go for it, because if you're sending everything to the orb, unless you pick up Khalim's Prayer or Sagittarius, you're not generating the extra Faria that you might need for Last Nightmare. In this situation, Teddy just goes for reinforcing with creatures rather than having to rely on that Last Nightmare. But if he had gone for the aggressive Brigand, you generally get the attack free to the orb there. So then you have the extra Faria to potentially play Last Nightmare.
Cypher's Wrath on the Mistral Guide. That Mistral Guide has generated a lot of value even after it got taken down by the Humbling Visions. I know Teddy's definitely in the driver's seat because he took a turn to Cypher's Wrath, the Mistral Guide. He allows Happy Joe to, well, he basically allows Teddy to take the removal on the 4/4 with the 4/3 and then block with the Mistral Guide and maybe even like dash a Brigand onto that aggressive mountain. He's only chipping away with a 1/1, but it will add up. Like, it's going to add up over time. You could even summon the Sagittarius as well if he wants to.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we saw from Teddy earlier in the earlier series. He had that one Sagittarius set up near his own orb. He says, I'm going to just control the game and deal 1 damage at a time if I have to, but I'm going to eventually win this game. And now set up for a position where he gets that salmon starting to roll. If Happy Joe can't deal with that right now, that's going to end up being the extra accelerated clock that Teddy needs.
I'm not sure about draw there. I think you +1 and then you wait for Garadan. I think that's the only way you get back in this match. But then again, Teddy's just sitting on Last Nightmare, so maybe that doesn't even work out that well.
Yeah, if you +1 in that situation, Teddy should have the read that it's Garridan, so he doesn't play any more creatures and still has the extra Faria built up for the Last Nightmare, like you mentioned. And that all goes back to the fact that Teddy went for that great clear with the Soul Drains and Spirit Theft earlier on and saved that Last Nightmare when it could have been used onto a Ground Shaker, which is still a very good target for a Last Nightmare. Teddy had the ability to go for what is a smaller clear and save that Last Nightmare for a bigger creature when he potentially didn't have that smaller line set up.
Now, this is where the next level read comes. Does he soul drain his own creature to play around Double Flame Burst? Because I think if you draw as Happy Joe there, you're drawing for Double Flame Burst. And yep, he's gonna do it. He knows. If you take the, so if you +1 there, you're gonna Garadan, right? If you draw there, you're drawing for Flame Burst because it's your only out. And Teddy reads it perfectly, drops that soul drain on his own creature, and gets himself the Mac.
Yeah, super smart as well that Teddy goes for the Soul Drain onto the Guide. If he had gone for a Soul Drain onto one of his 3 health creatures, potentially a Ground Shaker comes down and clears off that and the 2 Vermins that were on the board and maybe slows and the damage down enough that he can clear it. But because he goes for it onto the 4/2, or the 4/4 takes it down to a 4/2, the only thing that can clear all of his creatures would be Garridan, and there just isn't enough Faria for Happy Joe to do it. So Teddy, even in going for those advanced reads like you're talking about, playing it so perfectly.
I must say, this is probably the most unique but also rewarding Yellow Rush we have seen in a long time. I'm not a big fan of old Yellow Rush, just neutral up to the face, sack your guys, a Demon Wrangler, just flood at the orb, and then, roll the dice to see if you win. This Yellow Rush requires a lot of position, a lot of patience. You know, like I said, death by 1,000 cuts. I really like this style of Yellow Rush because I think it just rewards smart play. And I'm not saying that Yellow Rush isn't a skillful deck. There is skill involved in it, but there are just some cases in the olden days where you just like vomit a load of creatures and you win, right? The way this has been built, the way it's piloted, the all different avenues you can take from Mistral Guide from your orb to rushing up to the front. It's just such an amazing deck to watch. I'm just really enjoying watching Yellow Rush, and it's been a while since I've been able to say that, I must admit.
And the build like this, like you're saying, it has so many different things that it can do. It can go for the standard start where you just, like you said, vomit creatures at your opponent's orb, because it has the salmons in there, which Demonic Salmon stays on board and starts building up. You also get the discounts for Shaitan Scavenger and then potentially Zealous Crusader. The same way that we saw Teddy start games. And then he has the tools to reset if necessary and go back for collection positions or go back for defensive positions. And then when he can, go back on the forefront and get back aggressive again. But yeah, it's just so many heads up lines by Teddy where he just goes, okay, I need to reset now. Okay, I need to go back aggressive now. Or just finds all of these really, really unique situations almost where he can get the right things at the right time.
I feel like this deck is a fine line between tempo and aggro. It kind of has the option to do both. It can go from a completely rush down deck to a more tempo orientated deck where you're just trying to control the board and get value. Sometimes we've even seen Teddy shift to the old control game plan where he just controls the board until he gets that Zealous Crusader deck. It's a magnificent build. I've just really enjoyed watching it so far. But this is something we've seen crop up today. Gift of Steel making its return to competitive theory. A lot of players have said this card just isn't good anymore.
Yeah, and because it got nerfed from 3 to 4, it actually is a big Feria point, because on the 3, if you draw into it, you can play it right away. But being at 4 Feria, you really need to plan around when you're going to Gift of Steel, which creature you're going to Gift of Steel, and get a lot of value back from it. We've, of course, seen the Queen's Guards and the Underground Brigands be the big staple Gift of Steel receivers throughout the course of the day. And those are cards that generate extra Feria just by themselves. So as long as you can plan out for it the right way, they are cards where you get the extra value for the extra cost of Gift of Steel now.
And Gift of Steel is massively relevant here. He can go for +1 Gift of Steel, kill the Zealous Crusader, and slow things down. And I think that's what you kind of have to do here. I don't know. I guess you could play Brigand, but it's not very...
Yeah, I mean, if the Herald of War was right beside the orb, you definitely go for the orb hit. Because you're playing red, you probably have Flame Burst, you can end the game way quicker than your opponent. But if happyjo doesn't go for the trade now when it's set up, Teddy's able to get the Crusader to the orb, and then he has that first advantage in the race. So even though happyjo maybe swings for 7 next turn, he's just setting up a situation where Teddy's going to hit you for at least 5 this turn. And you're playing against a deck that does have a little bit of healing, so you can never really guarantee that you win that race. So in this situation, when you have the clear available, I think happyjo has to go for it, but it's super difficult to want to play the Brigand and get that down rolling.
The sad thing is he goes for the clear, and he just sits into the Soul Drain now, right? So Teddy's follow-up is really strong. You can go Salmon, Vermin, Soul Drain. You can even take the draw. So yeah, Soul Drain now, go into the Salmon, hit face. Could go Vermin if he wants to. I don't think he needs to necessarily. And now happyjo's on the back foot once again. So just difficult situations for happyjo to deal with. And that's what Teddy's been doing to his players. Just put them in really difficult situations where they're just like, oh, this doesn't feel good. I don't want to do this.
Right, and the big thing there, or I should say a big thing there as well, is Happy Joe did kind of force Teddy to have the Soul Drain. If it was something just like the Wind Soldier in hand, and that attacks in, the Herald of War at least still gets another proc of its combat ability, and this Brigand comes down as a 4/5, which is much more difficult for Teddy to deal with. So if Teddy didn't have the Soul Drain there, then Happy Joe does get a little bit more extra value, but just having it was such the perfect response, a perfect removal at the right time.
Now, at least Happy Joe does generate some Feria back now, so he gets a bit back for his struggles. He gets to hit into the salmon. It's a little awkward in some ways because if he builds land across to dodge the Sagittarius, he actually just runs into the vermin. But I think that is the lesser of two evils because at least you'll get the combat trigger off the vermin. But you also open yourself up to get shot by Sagittarius. So what do you want here? Make your choice, Happy Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Now, really nicely, Happy Joe getting the combat trigger is going to get him up to a Shed and Brute point. So even though the Sagittarius can potentially pick up value onto either the orb or kill off the Brigand, Happy Joe does at least get another creature onto the board. And that's a big thing right now. Teddy has done so well throughout the course of the day at limiting whatever his opponent can do. So Happy Joe being able to now generate a bit of extra resources, get another creature down onto the board, and continue at least having some board presence, at least keeps him in the game for now and slows Teddy down a bit.
This is an interesting line. I quite like it because he puts a big Death Touch threat in the middle. So this layer can now challenge basically everywhere on the board, apart from, say, a Flash Salmon that goes to face or maybe a Demonic Salmon, but the Brigand still retains that one life. My only issue with this line is he does kind of open himself up a bit to Spirit Theft, but at least he forces it. And we've seen Lair be a problem for Teddy in the past, but he has navigated around it. You know, the one thing this deck can do is it can play patient, and it can just chip away at you slowly and then chip away at the structure and look for those openings. And I think that's going to be the case here as well.
Yeah, and the structure does end up being really awkward just because Teddy only has one attack creatures on the board, and it contains that forwardmost desert. So giving Happy Joe that little bit extra time, as well as it potentially looks like 2 extra health from the production, is really nice. So it's just all about buying time for Happy Joe right now.
Soul Drain picked up, so a way to deal with the Brigand without giving the combat trigger. That can be very important. Giving extra resources to opponent through combat triggers is usually quite sad. And he does open up the line of Soul Drain, play Flash Salmon hit, play Demonic Salmon hit, so he gets 2 hits on the orb, cycles the Flash Salmon. I think it's inevitable that we're going to see the Sagittarius die, but at least it does get some value. You know, it almost finishes off the structure and does line up a finish from the vermin. So things are looking good for Teddy still.
Happy Joe with a pretty difficult decision now. Really nice play by Teddy to actually go for covering the defensive mountain, because even though the +1 Brute is very likely the play and is the play that we see from Happy Joe, that very easily could have been defensive and just something big that Teddy would have struggled to punch through. But now going for it in the aggressive line, it sets up now a race situation. That's 10 damage potentially going through to the orb for Happy Joe next turn. So Teddy has to find something that, like he picked up the Crusader now, which is a fantastic draw, puts him back in the lead for the race.
Yeah, something big and hard to punch through. A 10-10 Crusader fits that bill very nicely. Going to be an 11-11 Crusader once this Salmon goes in. We did see Teddy highlight the double neutral, so he's thinking about just blocking to make sure that Crusader can just move up and hit for that 11 damage. Takes a draw instead, so he does kind of open himself up to a defensive mountain into Grimguard. That does kind of open up that option, but he seems pretty confident this Crusader is going to get through.
Yeah, even a defensive, if it's not a Grimguard and it's just something else attempting to block, the Salmon can move off over the Ocean Tile, and then the Crusader can take that spot that it's currently occupying, that mountain there, and still hit the orb. But like you said, if it is Grimguard, it's really difficult for Teddy to get through, just because he wouldn't be able to move the Salmon out of the way, wouldn't be able to get that Crusader through, but doesn't pick it up in the end.
This is tough. Oh man, okay. So you just hit orb and cross your fingers because you have to flame burst the salmon. So you're banking on your opponent not drawing 1 damage, and this is what's going to come down for happyjo. So Teddy now has 2 draws to find that 1 down. Oh, there it is.
And there it is. Doesn't even need the second draw. Really nicely set up as well by happyjo, because if Teddy doesn't find that damage, he still has the Flame Burst in hand, where if Teddy's response is a Soul Drain, he still has the extra damage needed. But yeah, again, fantastically played by Teddy, controlling the early game and just being able to punch through the little damage wherever he can. Eventually gets to the point where the Crusader comes out that is just way too powerful for happyjo to deal with. And Teddy goes to 12-0 on the day, making it into the grand finals.
Right now, it's looking like Teddy is going to take this based on statistics, but can there be a finalist coming from the other side of the bracket that can stop his rampage? Maybe. We don't know yet. I'm not sure who is on the other side of things. Do you know who we have playing?
I don't think we have an update on it yet. It is Rundong versus Super Blizzard in the other semifinal. It is being cast over on the Korean coverage, so I could pop over and take a look to see if they have a score posted to see where that series is at, but I don't know. I assume they're still within the series.
So Rundong, Superb Blizzard, these are the saviors of Feria that can stop Teddy from taking this Seasonal Cup, and also claiming, I believe he still gets another yak, right? We have a Teddy yak in creation, so we could create another yak. We don't want Teddy to have all the yaks. That's one thing. But we can jump potentially into that Rundong Superb Blizzard game in a little while. We're going to have to wait. So once we get that available, once they jump into another match, we can jump in and catch the rest of that series. But until then, we are going to have to cut to a break, and we will have that match for you shortly. Hopefully, we'll get into that soon and see who will face Teddy in the finals.